sorry, my Google is, my data is not popping up, so some other time. Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, on to our final keynote speaker, a very regular face at QAI's STC, a good friend of ours, and happy to call on stage Rajini Padmanaban. Ladies and gentlemen, put it together for Rajini. Rajini has been a very, very regular speaker and always look forward to. She's Vice President QA Infotech, and as VP of Testing Services Engagements, Rajini leads engagement management for some of the large and strategic accounts, managing the operations of the center in Bangalore. She comes with over 15 years of professional experience, primarily in software QA. Rajini is also active evangelist of software quality. Her writings are regularly published at TechWell and Sticky Minds, and she's an active speaker at national and international forums. As for STC, she's not a new face, not at all. At least this is her fourth or fifth year.
This is my fifth year, yeah.
Fifth year, okay, I could count 4. So I've been wonderful. Another round of applause for her 5th year at STC. And glad to welcome you, Rajini, and it's always a pleasure to host you, have you as a speaker. So also, Dr. Shankar, we have so many. Meenal was here today earlier. Meenal has been as many years almost. So always great, good. Cheers to women power, and over to you, Rajini.
Thank you. Thanks for such a kind introduction. And thank you all, firstly. I don't see this room as half empty. I see this room as half full. And that is enough for me to keep it going. So thank you, all of you, for joining in today. So as he said, this is my 5th year, and when I was wondering about what to take to the audience, right, I said, hey, it's the last session of the conference as well. I want to leave the audience with something powerful, something meaningful, but at the same time, keep you all energized and not sleepy and drowsy. So that's the topic that I chose. We will have a bunch of examples along the way, so hopefully we'll make it interesting for everyone out here. And when I was also seeing how to really get this going, I said, let me align it with the theme of the conference, right? Quality in the age of digital convergence and disruption. So I said, let me align it with that and take a topic where today, as there is digital convergence and disruption, we as the testing fraternity are continuing to face a lot of challenges. How do we override these challenges? How do we overcome these challenges? I think it all lies in understanding the true meaning of quality beyond just day-to-day testing, beyond just day-to-day activities. Yes, your testing activities, your automation, all of that is going to continue to happen. None of that is questionable, none of that is debatable. It ought to happen. But we really need to understand the true meaning of quality beyond all of this. So that is where I am here today. And as we start, right, what's really in a name? We may be called testers, we may be called SDETs, we may be called software engineers. What's really in a name? As long as we understand the true meaning of quality, we're really going to be able to surpass all the challenges that lie ahead of us, not just today, but for the coming years as well. And when I start this, I always like to do some bit of level setting, some bit of context setting as we start a presentation. So if you really see, on one hand, maintenance costs still account to anywhere between 40 to 90% of a project's overall cost. Now, I'm not saying all of this is completely attributable to lack of quality or poor quality, but a significant portion of this is still going to be attributed to lack of quality or poor quality in some shape or form. And if you really see the software testing techniques we continue to use today, they're still largely age-old practices that we've carried for decades together. And when I say this, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with age-old practices, but what is important is to question that status quo, right? Continue to look for ongoing continuous improvement, to question that status quo and keep moving on. So while this is there on one hand, on the other hand, numbers are promising where they show us that both independent testing as well as testing in the world of DevOps is continuing to grow, at least by a double-digit percentage until about 2018. That's the forecast as of now. And finally, if you see, this is where, again, digital convergence comes in, right? So if you really see, as of today, there are 12 billion devices that connect to the internet, devices or processes, And this number is expected to touch about 50 billion by 2020. And another interesting fact is that by 2022, almost everyone globally under the age of 25 is going to be digitally savvy. So all of these give us some sort of a level setting that there is promise, there is hope, but we truly understand that quality is everyone's responsibility. But what happens here is when we say quality is everyone's responsibility, yes, a developer is owning quality, a build engineer is owning quality. Obviously, it's the tester's neck that's still out in the line if something goes wrong. But more importantly, when a non-testing fraternity tries to take ownership of quality, they look at quality only from a test execution standpoint. They don't necessarily understand the full meaning of quality. So that is where I am here today to talk about the full meaning of quality. Again, this is not a comprehensive definition, but these are going to be critical pillars, and I'd be happy if each one of us here walks away with these 4 key pillars in mind, saying this is where quality is going to continue to be critical in the coming years. So what's my inspiration for today's talk, right? So an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So lately, a TED Talk a day is what has been really creative, inspiring, and energizing for me. So I've been listening, I regret not having listened to all these years. The last 4 or 5 months, I try to listen to at least 1 TED Talk a day. This is a TED Talk not by any major celebrity. She's not a film personality. She's not a politician. She's a humble psychologist. She talks about 4 pillars in her TED Talk to understand the true meaning of life beyond happiness. She says, what do we all strive for, right? We work hard, we aspire for promotions, we want our families to do well. What is the ultimate goal in all of this? Happiness, right? In some shape or form. But she says there's a lot more to life than just happiness. She talks about 4 pillars, where she talks about purpose, belonging, transcendence, and storytelling. Purpose basically being, what do we give more than what do we get back? Belonging in the sense of our connect in the ecosystem that we really fit in. Transcendence in terms of those rare aha moments that you experience, where you're able to rise above the hustle and bustle of normal life. And finally, storytelling, where you're able to convince yourself and everyone else around you about who you are and what you do. So an excellent presentation, and when I listened to Emily talk, I said, don't all of these apply to us exactly in the world of quality? If we really understand quality in the context of these 4, of purpose, belonging, transcendence, and storytelling, there's a newer meaning for quality that we have than just core day-to-day testing. So that's the message with which I'm here today. I'm going to have a bunch of examples in this presentation from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, his latest book, Hit Refresh. How many of you have had a chance to read or at least lay your hands? Perfect. A few of us out here. A newfound respect that I have for this gentleman on reading this book, where he talks about rediscovering the company's culture, rediscovering the company's soul. So I found a lot of those examples very relevant in the context of understanding quality from this TED Talk. So here I am to combine those 4 pillars from that TED Talk with a bunch of examples from Satya Nadella in the context of what we do in the quality fraternity. Fair enough? Cool. So the first one is purpose, right? Again, very, very simple words if you see all of them. Purpose, belonging, transcendence, and storytelling. So the first word, purpose. What do we really understand by purpose, right? The context, the larger meaning of what we do, and more about what we do than what we get back in return. So Satya basically says, we all spend way too much time at work that we cannot afford to not have a purpose. Having a purpose is going to be very, very important. He talks about how his purpose in the organization is all about bringing in great ideas and connecting that with end-user empathy. For a second, think about this from the testing fraternity. Doesn't this absolutely apply to us? Bringing in great ideas together, combining it with end-user empathy. So how many of us here, again, raise of hands, when we are given a certain module to test, a certain product to test, how many of us take the time to understand the purpose of what we do beyond the core day-to-day activities? There's nothing wrong if we don't raise. Perfect. Good to see some show of hands out here. So it does not mean the people that have not raised their hands here are not capable of doing it or don't want to do it, but oftentimes it's a lack of awareness, right? I have enough on my plate to take on a day-to-day basis. Why should I take the effort to understand the larger purpose? He talks about an example here in terms of how he actually developed this purpose for empathy. So back in 1992, as he was going through his interviews at Microsoft, he did really well in his technical interviews. In his last interview, apparently he was almost shown the door. The interviewer gave him a scenario saying, there is a baby in the middle of the road at night crying. What would you do? And Satya immediately said, I'd call 911, right? He went by the book, he went by the process. And the guy showed him the door saying, Satya, first develop some empathy. Everything else can follow. I think that is very important for all of us to understand quality because we are all end-user advocates. Empathy connected with great ideas is what really defines quality because with this clear understanding of purpose, what evolves is a clear understanding of end users, a greater appreciation for all other attributes of quality as well. I'm not just a functional tester, I'm not just a performance tester, I'm not just a security tester. I understand quality from an end user experience and empathy standpoint. I think that is very, very important to set yourself aside from a purpose standpoint. So from this particular category, I'd say what stands out to me is we are all working towards shipping great ideas. Let's connect that with end-user empathy as well, and let that become the purpose in our drive to better quality. The second category that we move on to is belonging. Where do I belong? Increasingly, I'm sure we all acknowledge that we do not work in an isolation. We work within a certain team. We understand the collaboration that we have with multiple entities. We have the most number of connects as well within a product team. But belonging is even more than that, truly surrendering yourself both extrinsically and intrinsically for the sake of quality. Again, going by Satya's example, right? So when the CEO search process was on at Microsoft in 2014, he said, I didn't know if I'm going to be the CEO of the company. If that were to be me, great. But I also told myself that if the board did not choose me, I'd still be extremely happy to work for whoever the board has chosen because I truly belong here. Fine, this level of belonging probably all of us would have. In fact, he also talks about how one of the interviewers told him that you have to show personal hunger and ambition to get the job. And Satya said, that's never me, because I truly belong here. If to some extent, this sounds like Bhagavad Gita, right? Usually I'm not a very philosophical person. But going by Gita, you do your duty and the outcome would automatically come in. I think that's where belonging comes in. And not just intrinsically, as I said. He talks about an example of how the Linux community was very excited with the Azure product. But Linux came and told Microsoft that you guys have named it Windows Azure. There is great potential, but we are not going to be able to use it. So shackling the traditional bounds that Microsoft has had, he said, I'm going to make this Microsoft Azure, no more Windows Azure. A strong connect was therein established. He says, in one of the conferences, I pulled out my iPhone, and everyone in the conference had their eyeball rolling. A Microsoft CEO pulling out an iPhone. But he said, this is a unique iPhone, which is completely loaded with the Microsoft productivity apps. So such is the belonging we all have today in the world of quality. There is competition, there is healthy competition that will continue to prevail, but we belong in the ecosystem with that purpose of end-user empathy. And with belonging, I don't have to say what benefits follow in the space of quality: greater team bonding, faster resolution of issues, better productivity. A win-win situation really for everyone that is owning quality is what is going to entail. So we spoke about the first pillar, which was purpose, second pillar, belonging. The third pillar is slightly a longer pillar, a pillar that talks about transcendence. Now, obviously, when I looked at this word, I understand the basic meaning of transcendence, but I said, let me go look it up to pull out the true meaning. Transcendence is all about extraordinary experiences, right? How are you able to rise up the hustle and bustle of what you do on a day-to-day basis? And I think this is very important for us in quality in the name of innovation. A couple of years back at STC, In fact, my keynote was just on this topic, 5 quick bites to innovate in software testing. And I cannot emphasize the need for innovation anymore. People do continue to ask, saying, is testing dying? What is the future of testing? The future of testing really lies in our hands with such transcendent experiences that come in. Again, I'm not a Microsoft representative or whatever out here, bunch of examples being quoted, but I literally fell in love reading this book, and I said so many interesting examples that I ought to bring to the table. He talks about how every individual at certain point in time will have to hit refresh in our careers to be able to bring in that transcendent experience. Very few of us are going to be lucky to have this upward smooth slope in the growth in our career. Satya has had to take a step back in his career at very different points in time to be able to move forward. Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, she had to take a huge step back when she was switching from government to the IT jobs. So we all have such refresh points, every society, every organization. But keep in mind, the transcendence really has to come in from all of these experiences. Now, when I talk about transcendence specifically in the name of quality, there are a few examples that we've mentioned here. We always say, yes, innovation is important, transcendence is important, but where do I really start, right? Isn't that something reserved for the R&D department? Isn't it something big? Can I really start in my own small scale? Transcendence can really happen at very different points. We're going to discuss a few of those specific to software testing. But as Okay, so as we speak about these, how many of us, I'll speak as this loads, how many of us know here that Satya's first kid, who's 21 years old today, is a physically challenged kid? He was just perfect, good to see so many. So Zen, who's 21 years old, is a kid, or rather no more a kid, with cerebral palsy. He's also legally blind. So he says, outside of all of this, I've had innumerable ICU experiences that I've had to go through with this kid growing up. But one day I walked into the quiet of his room. Everything was quiet, just the medical devices were beeping out there. And all I was able to feel in that quietness of the room was the transcending experience software such as these is able to give in the life of kid like Zen and the millions of kids out there, millions of users out there, millions of senior citizens out there. I'm literally getting goosebumps as I say this, right? So such is the power of transcendence that we can bring in through quality and what we do. Similarly, Ashish here can vouch for this. Ankush Garg is a guy with low vision in our company. He talks about how his transcendence comes in with the connect with music, right? Transcendence always need not be through what you do in your job. I'd be, I think, faking if I say everything has to be connected with your job in some shape or the other. What is inspiring you to get things back into what you do and what means the most to you is what is important. So Ankush talks about how music gives him the transcendent experiences. And very recently, I read an article talking about how software testers are actually innate musicians and how musicians are very good as software testers because, the analytical abilities, the creativity into what takes to be a great musician are common attributes that software testers also possess in some shape or form. So look for such transcendent experiences as you understand the meaning of quality, not just in the scope of what you do, but even outside, to be able to translate that creativity to build extraordinary experiences. Now, moving on specific to software testing, I'll give you a few ideas for, scope for transcendent experiences. A couple of slides here are ones that I presented 2 years back about 6 thinking hats, right? We always talk about the unidimensional thinking in testing. How do I bring in creativity? This is an idea based on the book by Edward de Bono called The 6 Thinking Hats, where you wear multiple colored hats at different points in time to trigger your thought process in different directions, be it positive scenarios, negative scenarios, analytical abilities, all of these are going to be able to instill further creativity in you. We've been using this in our organization across employees, and we've seen significant results. But here is something for you to try to build a transcending experience. Games. Especially today, when you have non-testing fraternity owning quality, one of the easy ways out, one of the productive ways out, one of the fun ways out is to build simple games to encourage them come into testing as well. And herein the other advantage is you can build a lot of emotional-based outcomes in your testing process when you bring in games. So here again, you have the Robert Dillion framework, which helps you connect emotions and outcomes. So at a high level, if you bring in these into your games, you're also able to incorporate the emotional quotient. I'll give you another example here. This was a poster we had in our company in our internal conference, where when you talk about emotional-based testing, there are two ways in which you can do this. One, which is when you use a certain application, you test a certain application, try to see what kind of emotion you get by using that application. Are you feeling annoyed? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling, yes, everything looks super intuitive? Because these will give you cues in terms of how the end users are going to actually feel for the application. It could mean that the performance of the application is slow. It could mean that it is not intuitive. So every time you actually test an application, henceforth, please try to bring in this emotional angle as well. The other way around, look at what application you are testing, what kind of users use your application, what typical emotions they face, and try to introduce that in your testing process. Let's say a healthcare application, the end users could be very nervous or anxious. A banking application, they're very, very quick to try things out. So based on the type of application you are testing, try to bring in some of those emotions into your testing process. So this is one other idea to try from a transcending experience. Testing in production. How many of us here test in production? A few show of hands out here. So I think testing in production is long gone the stipulation that it's just about monitoring end user feedback. Just about bringing in maybe some crowdsourced users. With due diligence, testing in production can prove to be very, very beneficial. With the right checks and balances in place. One, because we may not have time to test everything up front, but more importantly, there is a lot more realistic outcomes coming out in testing in production. So as long as the right call has been made saying these are additional things I'm going to try in production, that's another area where a lot of innovation can happen. A few other ideas, one of which Ashish actually presented in the earlier track that we have been trying in our organization, mobile device performance testing. Most of us still look at performance from a mobile application performance testing, but there is a lot of scope for innovation when we lay our hands on mobile device performance testing. With the Digital India move, there is a lot of scope for innovation for Indic language testing, bunch of nuances in there, so that's another area to innovate. Another area to innovate along emotions, along usability, is everyone trying their hands at accessibility, very, very simple to really get into. A couple of other areas, security, we still continue to look at it from an OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, but there's a lot more to innovate when we move to the lower layers. So here are some ideas, again, developer tools and plugins as well. So the moment we talk about the testing fraternity becoming technical, we think automation. I'm not saying that is the ultimate path we want to get to. We want to be able to automate so we're able to free ourselves for bigger and better things. But at least one of the first things for us to try, if we are not proficient with programming, is try developer tools and plugins. F12 tools, very, very simple and straightforward to use. But these are scenarios which are going to help you bring in a lot more end-user delight. You could be a services company working for a client, a lot more value add, a lot more ongoing continuous improvement through some of these ideas out here. So we spoke about purpose, we spoke about belonging, we spoke about transcendence. The last pillar I want to speak about is storytelling. We often have a lot of people, not just in the industry, even in our lives, who talk the talk, right? Who can just talk it out and move on. A lot of people who walk the walk, who do their jobs but are not able to speak for it. I think that is the more important concern. In the testing fraternity, we should be able to talk the walk as well. There are so many of us out here in the testing fraternity that do an amazing job, which definitely does not show up because we are unable to talk the walk. So I think that is very important. Again, in Satya's book, I'll bring the example out here. In the book, he talks about an amazing number of cricket analogies. For him, he says, I'm extremely passionate about cricket. I storytell everything in the context of cricket. So pick what really excites you, what really gets you going, because storytelling is about convincing yourself, your users, your stakeholders in terms of who you are, what you really stand for, what you really represent. But this doesn't come overnight, right? Again, Satya says, in his own senior leadership meetings, here you have the senior leaders of the organization, not many speak up. And they don't speak up oftentimes because of the fear of sounding stupid, not sounding smart in a large gathering. Or it may be, why should I really speak up? Am I not smarter than the people out here? Why should I speak up? Either situation is a wrong situation to be in. We need to shackle those. And as testers, we really need to be able to storytell, because with storytell comes in very good communication, very good articulation. More importantly, with storytelling comes a better understanding of the purpose, a better and stronger sense of belonging, and better transcending experiences. And this is where I said I'm going to pull Pradeep as well in. The first year I was here at STC in 2013, it was my first year, I was like, Pradeep, what would the audience really appeal and connect with? Give me some tips and all such things. And he tells me, Pradeep, do you remember telling me? Saying, bring in some Bollywood stories and how you can connect them. I was like, huh? Here I am a non-film buff, and how do I connect all of these with stories and films? So, but he is totally right. If such is the power of conveying a certain message through a half-hour presentation, through effective storytelling, how effective is our day-to-day understanding and implementation of quality going to be if we really begin to storytell and convince ourselves and the rest of them as to who we are and what we deliver in terms of quality. There are 5 C's we've all traditionally known, right, in terms of supporting an organization's success: the company, the context, the customer, collaboration, and competition. These may sound really overwhelming when we really look at it, but if you understand these 4 pillars of purpose, belonging, transcendence, and storytelling, achieving these 5 C's of success is just going to be at your fingertips. With that, I will end it with one more TED Talk. I started it off with a TED Talk. I'll end it with a TED Talk too. Sashi Tharoor's an interesting TED Talk again. He talks about how our educational system still works towards building well-filled minds. You cramp the mind with data. Why do you need that? We live in a digital world where information is just available at the tip of our fingers. Don't we rather need well-formed minds, well-mature minds, as opposed to well-filled minds? And the key, friends, for us in the fraternity of quality, to be able to have these well-formed minds, is to be able to truly understand the purpose, the belonging, transcendence, and convincingly be able to storytell. So with that, I will wrap it up. I hope I leave you all with this message of a newer perspective towards quality. Again, don't get me wrong, this is not a comprehensive definition where you may wonder saying, she's not touched upon day-to-day testing, CI, CD, delivery, automation, all of those. Yes, those are absolutely important. But let's rise above all of those as well, because those will continue to be taken care of by the role that we've been defined in the organization. The organization may not define these for us in the larger meaning of quality. Let's work towards understanding the purpose, belonging, transcendence, and storytelling. That's all I had. And thank you so much. Any questions?
I know they want to know who won the award. Okay. Yeah, please.
Some hands going up.
Thanks. It was a very good presentation. It makes me feel that the tester, which we are talking about, the humane is still in a tester, and we are talking about machines, and we're talking about testers and machine. But you reinforce the fact that there is a man or a woman in a tester. which is very important, and that reigns supreme. Thank you very much.
Learning and implementation that Shankar spoke about, right? As more of those come in, we will become more of empathetic testers. That is where the balance will really come in. Thank you, Shankar, for the comment.
Thank you, Rajini. Now, may I invite another important lady here, Bharti Venugopal, to hand over the token of appreciation to Rajini.
Sure.
Both step onto the dais, they would be a good photo op.
I was almost scared that I won't be visible.
Yes. Brilliant. So now, while the jury have kind of decided, they are just making sure they put them in a particular order, I thought I'll use this opportunity to answer those other analytical points of the quiz I gave in the morning. Do you still have that sheet with you? Would you like to know the answers? Okay. So you realize which animal you were, correct? So do you remember that still, or you forgot which animal you were? Okay. So the next question which I asked was, you go across into the forest and you see two red things watching you. And what would you do? In the science of NLP, what they say is it's kind of indicates your ability to take a risk. And those who have said, I will move forward and check it out, are those who will take risks. But remember, you have to always join both the analysis to make a conclusion. Like if you're a donkey as an animal and you move forward, then you are a very risky person, yes or no? That means you're making foolish, rash decisions, okay? If you're a tiger and you're moving forward, yes, you're a very aggressive risk taker, but then you're very calculated about that particular risk, okay? So you got to correlate them. Don't try to analyze individually and say, look, I'm a high risk taker and hence I will do it. Okay, that's being a donkey again, okay? The second information which you said, the second choice was you stay there and wait for things to change so that you can make a decision. Those are individuals who are considered like moderate risk takers. They're calculative, they analyze, but they also could develop a serious problem of analysis paralysis, right? It's like getting married, right? How many of you actually made a decision quickly? Would you just step forward like, I'll marry the girl I meet first? Would that be a good decision? Not that marriage is a good decision anyways, in the sense, it's a very tough one. Both sides. I'm saying it's both sides. In fact, many of the women do not even have a choice many times, okay? So, yeah.
When I got married, it was a waterfall model. Okay. I took a lot of time to finalize. Yes. I wasn't agile.
Fantastic. I think many of us would agree it was waterfall in one way or the other. I saw one girl after the other and then decided, so it was also waterfall. Okay, anyway, just kidding, jokes apart. The third one was I would turn back, which means you are a low risk taker. Now, many of you who may read that initially may say, low risk taking, not really a great trait. I don't know whether it's good to say to people, correct? But there are many professions in the world where low risk taking is an essential trait. As in, you don't want your tax auditor, or a tax filing CA to be a high risk taker, correct? As in, it's okay, we will not disclose anything. When they come back, we'll see. That's not a good statement. Or even a lawyers, they can't be high risk taking, correct? Even testers, do you think they should be high risk taking? In the initial days, they used to be so. We'll first send the shipment out, the release out, and if the customer complains, we'll think about why it happened, right? Not a good strategy, but then some professions require you to be low risk takers, go deep into it, and be intensely low risk taking as a profession. Fits them very well. So if you're a donkey and a low risk taker, again, a problem. Right? In the sense you're not even moving forward, correct? The third question which I asked you was what would you do with a key that you find on the floor of the forest, right? Key in the science of NLP is symbolic of opportunity. And what would people do with an opportunity is what we try to relate. Those of you said, I'll pick up the key and look for a door. Highly opportunistic. However, highly opportunistic, highly risk-taking, and a donkey. Tells us something, yes or no? So we have to be careful. So don't ignore that animal all the time, and also the other answers you made. Highly opportunistic, highly risk-taking. Possibly a good trait in some cases. So you've got to look at it that way. Those of you said, I'll pick up the key, keep it in my pocket, are the ones who are not aware of what they could do with the opportunity. An example, most of you have taken certifications, yes or no? In my profession, I meet across a lot of people who have a lot of degrees against them. When I interview them, and I say, how come you did your A, B, C, D, E, F, G degrees? And I say, that's surprising, how did you do that? And many of them said, I just picked it up just in case. You never know, sometimes it may be helpful. So that's where they do not know, what can they do with that opportunity. And again, they're low risk takers technically, so they kind of pick up all the qualification. Not a good trait sometimes. Sometimes it's a good trait, right? The third one is where you said, I will throw it away, right? Those are people who do not even recognize an opportunity. For them, the idea is to kind of train them to understand, what these opportunities are. They require a lot more education to become aware of it. But again, it could be, if you're a very calculated risk taker and you throw away an opportunity, that could be a decisiveness. But how decisive you are comes back to the next question. Then, the next question I asked was, you find a huge wall. And what would you see on the other side of the wall? Remember that question? The option was, those of you who said, I see a large water body on the other side. Dreamers, right? In the sense they don't visualize anything concrete. Everything is hazy. Life is very good outside the wall because I'm currently in a bad scenario. So that's the contextualization of the answer, okay? Dreamers, nothing is specific. And if I ask you to imagine a life on the beach, specifics become very difficult to help you, yes or no? It's blue sky, blue water, white sands, then what? It's very difficult. There's nothing else specific in that particular picture. Those of you said village, or what we call as consensual dreamers, which means their dream is not their dream. They would actually take others' opinion to form a dream. Like how we did engineering, yes or no? Right? As in, why are you doing engineering? What would you like to be when you grow up? I'm sure this question is asked to everyone when they were 5, when they were 10, when they were 15, and they stop asking after 20, yes or no? Because by the time you're programmed to go in a particular way, and they understand it doesn't matter, now he'll go in the flow. Agree? So, consensual thinkers are people who decide based on others' opinion. Why did you get married? Every one of my friends got married, right? Why did you do engineering? Everyone is doing engineering or a doctor. There was a point in my life where the choice I had of career was only 2. And my dad said, with my money, if you have to study, it's either engineering or a doctor. I said, Dad, I want to be a stand-up comedian. No, not with my money. Okay, so the point I'm here, so that's where the consensual thinkers come in. The third is what the persons who have chosen a castle. Very interesting set of people. Autocratic and despotic thinkers. They would look at their own view. They do not care. They're extremely clear. They're extremely obstinate. They're persistent, and they only go with that. Just like a king, right? If you're building a castle and 5 people died, the king would say, what would a king say? Collateral damage, yes or no? Just like what happened in Taj Mahal, if you have heard the story. He built one and he said there could be no other Taj Mahal. And he said, call all the workers and chop their hands off. Bad decision, but he was very clear. From his perspective of establishing something unique and making sure that remains unique, he achieved his goal. Extremely clear people, okay? But then, would they succeed in that role? I don't know. But these are characteristics that you need to understand. The next question was, whom would you like to meet to guide you out of the forest? How many of you here are above 40? If you have chosen, if any one of you rose the hands chose a saint, you're exempted. Right? In the sense it's accepted. At 40 in life, we tend to believe that God solves all problems. Yes or no? Right? Like anyone, if you ask anyone elderly, they'll say, don't worry, life will be good. Everything will take care of itself. Time will heal. Have you heard those statements? So 40 plus, believing that saint will guide them. Okay? Those who have said, magician, they do not look for repeatability, but they look for magic, sudden solutions, some miracles to happen, and that would make their life a little better. Those of you below 40 and chose saint need psychiatric help, okay? Because it takes 20 years to figure out that a saint needs to help you, okay? And you can't skip that, okay? You have to go through that particular journey And magicians are those miracles. They do not have repeatable behaviors. They normally are typically late-nighters. In your office, do you see people who work late nights? Everything goes pending till the last minute. And the last minute, 6 of them are working, and 12 others are sleepless, whether they're working or not. And then 18 others are worrying whether these 16 are like really doing their work. Have you had that feeling anytime? And everyone is cursing each other, okay? So typically, those are the miracle guys. Things happen, life goes on, just like we graduated in engineering, yes or no? One night, half an hour with your friends, group study, you got 60% and you got a great job, yes or no? Miracle? The professor taught for 40 hours over the semester in 4 months. Poor guy, did PhD, thought he changed the world. And here these guys are miracle guys, in the sense suddenly they made themselves a good score. The last one, the persons who have said scientists are extremely logical in reaching a conclusion. Very detective-centric, their forensic mind, they keep analyzing, synthesizing, till the time they kind of come to a conclusion. But yes, sometimes they may not be very successful too. Like they're very intense people, they do analysis and synthesizing all the time. But you know what? Over 20 years, they also realize Saint is the best option, yes or no? Okay? But anyways, I'm not influencing anyone, but yes. The last question which I asked was choice of drink, right? The answer is pretty simple. Don't blame me for it if it is your personal health preference or anything. But coffee for leaders, tea for managers, water for workers. Okay? So if you've chosen water and said, I'm healthy, you're like worker. Any one of you had an espresso shot anytime? The real espresso shot, Italian espresso shots? No? It's like pure coffee, right? Ground coffee, decoction, so to speak, without sugar, early morning, every day. Would you love to have it? No? It's bitter. The reasoning is very simple. The more bitter the drink, the more intense you have to be as a person to kind of appreciate the taste and continue to maintain that consistency of having it day on day. That signifies how intense you are as a person. It's bitter, it's not easily taken, it's difficult. Once you take it, you get a high. You probably will be blabbering, but still you have to do that every day as a ritual, right? Intense. Tea, technical British guys, right? Breakfast, English breakfast tea, as they called it. Afternoon tea parties is what they did it. Most of them were very good managers, okay? Little diluted, at the same time a little dark. So that's what it is. Water, commonly available drink, everyone would love to have it. Nowadays everyone says it's health reasons, but go and think about it. Water, it's a common drink, average person has it every day. There's no difference between you and the other person, okay? So does that help you? Now connect all the questions, go back, mull over it, okay? It's an interesting thing. I'm a donkey, low risk taking, highly opportunistic, and I drink water, okay? And that gives you some sense of a personality you are. If you're really curious to know a little more about this, there is a 90 questions questionnaire, which actually helps you to understand you and yourself and the team that you work with. In the organization that I previously worked with, we used to actually do this as a part of their initial onboarding process, and we would group them. Because you can't have 5 wolves together, yes or no, who are highly opportunistic in a team. It's dysfunctional, right? You got to have 1 wolf, 4 sheep, 1 lion guarding them. Balance. Then things will be in semblance. Less conflicts, less worries, life goes on smoothly, right? So think about that. So that's the analysis for you. Don't disclose your answers to your friends now that the analysis is out, okay? At least the animal, please don't tell that. Now I've had people who had traumatic experiences with that. Sure. And calling me and saying, you know what, you tell that day, and I told my friend that I'm a donkey. From that day, I've never got a promotion for the last 3 years. How can I change myself? And I can't help there. And you can do this repeatedly after a certain time. Give it like a 3-month break. Go back and look at the answers. Try to rethink the questions and the answers. You'll see whether you're changing or not. So the idea is to program your brain to start behaving in the manner you like to be. Right? It changes your dress first. It changes your body language. It changes your address after some time. And it also changes the way people address you also. Okay? So it's a way of building yourself. Okay? So without much delay then, I have Amber and Sonakshi still debating, what to do with the results, because there's been a long debate on the winners. Okay? And the jury also had a long discussion on it. But let me brief the process that we went through to reach this point so that all of you are aware of what was the entire element. I briefed in the morning, but just for the sake of confirmation, I'm just repeating it once again. 572 papers, 6 different cities. First level was a screening by QAI team, okay? And to see for relevance of papers. So 572 got shortlisted to 227. 227 individuals were given opportunities to present to various jury members. And these jury sessions were conducted in 6 different cities. And it was in Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, then we had in Pune and Mumbai. And we had our hosts in each of these cities, very kind hosts, so I'll name them. QA Infotech in Delhi. Then in Mumbai, it was Deloitte. And in Chennai, it was in our own business center that we conducted it. Then in Hyderabad, it's SatNav. In Bangalore, it was CGI. And which one am I missing?